Nathan Zegura here from the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis for the 2-minute drill brought to you by University Hospitals. As they say, business definitely picked up here in Indianapolis as the quarterbacks and wide receivers took to the podium earlier this morning. And amongst the star receivers, well, many of them had one thing in common. They noted in their media sessions that they had already met with the Cleveland Browns, and I've talked to Daniel Jeremiah, I've talked to Dane Brugler, and you can check out some of those national perspective interviews as well. But really the consensus is that the Browns will be looking at wide receiver, and that the wide receivers that should be available to them at 13 are incredibly talented and come in a variety of flavors. Whether you want a guy like Garrett Wilson, who's at the top of the board for many receivers, many evaluators at the receiver position because of his ability to separate before and after the catch, or whether you want a guy that people are comparing to a Deebo Samuel, Treylon Burks, who led the SEC in plays of more than 20 yards, or a big 6'5" jump ball guy like Drake London. There are a lot of talented receivers for the Browns to consider there. It's also a good edge class, but that will come later in the week. In addition to the quarterbacks and the receivers at the podium today, there was also Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski, and he touched on a number of topics, including some of the changes in terms of the titles on his offensive staff. Here's what he had to say about that.
All those decisions, Tony, are in the best interest of the Browns. I do think ultimately it's good for his growth, but I think similarly, T.C. McCartney coaching tight ends, I think, is great for his growth. I broke in coaching tight ends. I think that's a really important spot for a young coach. So I think it's in the best interest of those guys, but most importantly, I think it's in the best interest of our staff. And I think bringing in a different perspective into that room, adding TC's voice into the tight end room, adding his voice, amplifying his voice, if you will, with the offensive staff, a lot of those moves are with the intention of doing our jobs a little bit better.
Again, the Browns with Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, they're not going to give you a lot of headlines. They're not going to give you a lot of news, but I can tell you from talking to both of them, they are focused on improving this team and getting it back to the playoffs in 2022. Quarterbacks, receivers, check out all that stuff at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Browns. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the 2-minute drill from the Combine in Indy, presented by University Hospitals.